Can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. Excellent. That's awesome. Thank you. I was just checking if everyone was awake and listening. So, thank you. So I'm Kamal Janardhan. I'm a group program manager in the information protection team, and I'm here to talk about compliance. Exciting, scintillating subject. At least I think so. I'd like to see a show of hands real quick on how many people have seen me present before, heard us talk about compliance at MEC or SharePoint. It's great. It's many familiar faces. And how many, thank you for coming back. How many folks saw this morning's session that we did, information protection, Office 365 Today and beyond? Great. Okay, well, thank you. And that gives me a sense of what are the new stories to tell, what's the new information to share, while also covering all the existing content. Okay. Excellent. That's always good when that happens. Let's give it a moment. And I think this, yep. Okay, so why compliance and governance? So there are a couple of ways in which the world has changed since, say, 10 years ago. Kind of the earliest was 2002. Sarbanes-Oxley got passed. And you could no longer say that somebody in your company hadn't clearly managed their data or managed their accounts. It became something the leader of a company became accountable for, the CSO, the CEO. More and more data became electronic. So all these rules we'd had for paper records that involved management of them, ensuring that there were processes for checking them out and checking them back in, became applied to electronic content. Now if you sent an email, it could be a record, and you were required to retrieve it and then provide it in court to an audience that you had never intended it for. 3, we're under attack. There's money and value in information that is stored online. Everything is accessible. Across the globe, there are people waiting to see what they can do with your data, whether it's stored in the cloud, whether it's stored in your homegrown server in a closet, or whether it's actually in a data center managed by your organization. This data is accessible, and it is profitable and risky for companies to get access to it. And do we think change stopped there? No, change is still coming. One of the things we had at a recent legal CIO conference in New York that Microsoft essentially meets with some of the largest law firms was, when we were curious, we were asking them, so does case law look like it's becoming steady? Or are there still changes? Do we see a sort of new regulations, new rules defined by, say, certain cases lost? And the response from lawyers was, we're a pretty entrenched industry. Change is rare, but it's constant. Litigation and how we handle electronic data, how we handle threats is changing every day. So what are you asking us for? What we've heard from you is we're required to be compliant. We're required to govern our data. We're required to prove that we have done the best effort, created the best processes to ensure that we are compliant with a country or a city or even a conglomerate, an EU nation of regulations. And in addition to that, the second question that we get a lot is, what are the insights? What are other companies like us doing? What does the average financial do when they actually want to deal with managing records of which they have an entire warehouse? What does a pharmaceutical do in how they manage their patents that go back to, say, 100 years? And so how can we help? Our goal and our intent is that if you need all these capabilities on your data, we want to provide them for you in Office 365. If you bring your data to Office 365, you own it. We have the responsibility for being guardians of it. And this means 3 things. First of all, that data in Office 365 is pervasive. So very specifically, about 10 years ago, you typically took data out of the Office 365 Microsoft workloads and put them into a separate store. That store was configured for efficiency, single instancing, end-user access wasn't that great, but then you were able to search across that store. And what you were comparing that against was drives or disks or tapes. What we heard from you about that particular solution was it's completely separate. It is not built into the fabric of how I actually use my data or store my data. It's not pervasive. Another thing we heard from you as an aspect of that was, okay, I put it in the separate store, but now I have information split across a multitude of databases. And furthermore, in the current world, I have information, say, in a separate archive, information in the Microsoft ecosystem, information on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, completely unrelated and in separate clouds. How do I have transparency and understanding of all that data that I am now responsible for proving compliance around? And that's transparency. The third piece of it is people-centric. So when we first started thinking about compliance, the simplest way to have a compliant system was, can anyone guess? To have no users. It worked great. Nobody accessed your data. No one leaked it. No one preserved or deleted it. But there's an obvious downside of that. And so one of the things that we believe we can do is take what is Microsoft's strength, which is the end-user experience around Office and Windows, and ensure that productivity isn't hampered when we provide compliance. And this is really the plagiarization of the Ben Franklin quote, which is, he who sacrifices productivity for compliance deserves neither. So this is what the world has been for quite a while. You've had a set of stores, some of them Microsoft, some not Microsoft, and you've essentially moved that data from one store to the other to get your compliance and governance solutions. Some of the challenges with this, it's data duplication. You lose data in its native format. Once you've moved an email, and we had an interesting conversation with a large oil company about the challenges of moving this data from their existing stores in which their users worked to another location. And their question was, we need to be able to do e-discovery in the native store. And so the question back to them was, well, when you are litigated against, is it sufficient to only provide a search results from your compliant store? And to say that all the other stores, Your Honor, not important. The answer is, of course, no. If you have data in your system and you have access to it, you will be required to produce it. And so there is value in making sure the proliferation of data is stopped. You're able to unify it in a single place and search and apply policy on it in that location. Incomplete information. If I go and edit a piece of content, or if I send a message on Twitter, this is not available to you if you only look in one store. And last of all, something that is particularly important to us and to this audience, which is our IT administrators, is a fragmented policy and experience. So if you have to go to 20 different experiences or 20 different consoles to apply a policy or ensure data doesn't get leaked, or if you even have to spend time internally defining what that policy is, the probability of error and the probability of being not compliant just goes up. And it's really something that we can simplify. And when I say we, I don't mean just Microsoft. We software providers can simplify. So where do we want you to go? We'd like to give you the ability to take this data from this multitude of stores. This is PSTs on your desktops, documents on network shares, social data, legacy data, which is the IBM DB2 system that was used in the early 90s by a particular organization that contains important information that they still have to be responsible for. They can't delete it. No one knows why, but nobody's going to touch that database. True story. So what we want to give you the ability to is to bring that data into Office 365. And so previously, we had some degree of solutions for you. You could bring the data to Office 365 by ingesting it into the network. You could upload it by putting it in a mailbox. You could use OneDrive or SharePoint to actually manually upload it from the drives. What we heard from you, our customers, was they're all too slow. For any large organization bringing that data into the service, you would have grandchildren before it was actually all in there. So does anyone know what is the fastest way to get data into the service? Thank you. And so I think for those of you who have seen this presentation before, it has absolutely been something that you have asked us for quite a while, which is, please, can I just put my content into a hard drive, put it on a plane, send it to you, and then you will take care of the ingestion to do it speedily into my service? And the answer is yes. As of now, we are thrilled to announce the ability that for emails, if you put your PSTs onto a hard drive and you ship it to us, you will now have the ability to ingest that content into Office 365, into the specific users. And we will be showing you a demo of that shortly. The second piece of this, once you've gotten the content into Office 365, is what are the capabilities we offer in Office 365 for you to manage this? And this is where the Compliance Center comes in. In Office 365, we no longer want you to go to one workload or another workload to do compliance. We no longer want you to spend time thinking about what does policy mean for documents, how is it different from email, and what does it mean for link? What we want to give you the ability to do is a single definition of policy and a single experience. And this is identified by the Compliance Center and the various tabs associated with it in that diagram. The second piece of this, making it easy to bring the data in, giving you a good experience, both of those will only succeed if we have the third, which is at the bottom. So Microsoft can make it easy to ship your data into the service. We can give you an experience that spans all the Microsoft content, but we will fail if we don't create a partner ecosystem that pulls in data that is not in Microsoft, that ensures that solutions you want for compliance that are not provided for us are also enabled, that experiences can be extended. And so the third piece of it, which is different from how we've been thinking about it up to this point, is we want to build a partner ecosystem around compliance to make it possible for you to have access to that metadata to enable the solutions that we are building. A few examples to make that real. I talked about drive shipping. Well, we have a bunch of partners today who already do this. They work with customers, upload all the data into drives, have those drives in their servers, and then use the network ingestion to pump that data to the service. And I see some of their faces over here. Thank you for giving our customers a solution. What we've decided to do is we have simplified by making that ingestion from the drive to Microsoft something that we can do effectively, fast, and error-free. By doing that, our partners can now focus on the collection and the management of all that content and bringing it into Office 365. And what we will continue to do to invest in this is what you tell us. If you, our customers, say is that it's great that you've got this drive shipping, but I also need you to make a solution that scans the entire environment for everything, then we will listen to that feedback and look into investing in that space. So first, our drive shipping partners. Questions at the end? Thank you. Please hold the thought. The second piece of it, from the drive shipping partners, and I think if some of you saw the session earlier today, you'll see it, is we have a legal review, a records management process that happens within Office 365. What we're looking to do is create partnerships with other companies that do, say, specialized verticals of legal review, pharmaceutical-specific records management, and allow you to build on top of the Office 365 ecosystem. And the third example that I'll give you before we move to archiving is this morning we announced the Activity Feed API. This is a single API in Office 365 where you can get all the metadata of every action that happens in your service. It's public. Our UX experiences are built on the same API that our partners have built on that experiences. And we have 100 partners signed up. Our expectation is all those interesting insights, alerting, et cetera, that we will build on top of Office 365, we want our partners to build at the same time. Because if the data is in Office 365 and you, our customer, has more solutions, it's a benefit to both of us. So where does the Compliance Center fit into this story? The first piece of it is a single experience. So a few years ago, we had a a conference with some of the CIOs of a bunch of large manufacturing companies. And one of the things they said to us was, this is great. They had a room full of Exchange, SharePoint, Lync, OneDrive. And they said, Lync folks, product group, please meet the Exchange product group. Exchange product group, please meet the OneDrive product group. Could you all please work together and give us one solution? So that single experience is really what you've asked us for, and that's what we're building, and that's what we're investing in. Tied to that single experience is the notion of a single policy and a single way of expressing security. When I say I want content which is sensitive not to be shared outside my organization, or I want everything with a keyword patent to be preserved indefinitely, I want that to be true whether I've shared that content over Lync, OneDrive, Exchange, Yammer, any of the workloads within Office 365. And that's what a consistent policy gives you. And the third piece of this is our goal to expose the data, the wealth that is in Office 365, and give you insights around it and alert you when there are trends in that information that you should know about. Today, if you want to find out what happens associated with a particular user, you go and collect the logs, you create a view, you hope that there's sufficient instrumentation. Well, our vision is to make sure that you can ask a simple question. Tell me everything about this user in Office 365. And the question I always get before we drill into this, how many people still have servers on premises? Well, this slide is for you. We're not just talking about these capabilities for the cloud. One thing that makes compliance unique is that we have a lot of customers who will choose to have some of their data or all of their data on premises because they have regulatory and compliance requirements. They are just slower to move to the cloud. And that is reasonable and acceptable. And so our goal is, insofar as we can, to bring these compliance functionalities to the upcoming on-premises releases. The reality is we can't innovate or deliver functionality as quickly to on-premises. But where we can, we will. And here's a quick summary, and it's not complete or exhaustive, of the things we're aiming to give you on premises. We also have this notion of Cloud Connect, which means that you may be an enterprise that has your users on premises, but you're connected to the cloud. You can see this as you have a connection and you trust the cloud, but for certain reasons you don't want that data to live in the cloud yet. And we see this as a reasonable middle state for many of our customers. In that world, our hope is to make it easy for you to send data to the cloud and perform compliance operations in that context. If you're pure on-premises, while we want very much to bring you to the cloud, we want to incentivize you, not force you. And so we have a set of features that enable that. OK, so I'm going to drill into archiving. What is archiving? It's storage. Our goal is to make it easy to ingest, give you all the storage you need, and allow you to preserve and delete this content across Office 365 in a simple way. The announcement that I am thrilled to make about archiving, in addition to our ability to ship drives, we have two previews coming up. One is a partner preview where we want the ability to ingest data from Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, third parties into Office 365, and we'll show you a demo of that. The second piece that we're actually working with partners on today is rehydrating from existing archives into Office 365. So how many folks in this audience have existing archives today and want to migrate the data from them? This is great. So I will say 2 years ago, I asked the same question, and nobody was willing to admit that they were migrating. They were thinking about it, so thank you. The second piece of this, the announcements that I want to make, is today several of you have data within Office 365, but the mechanism to allow this data to grow infinitely is clunky. So what we're also glad to announce right now is the ability to automatically grow your data as you ingest it into Office 365. So the scenario we envision is you put your data on a drive, ship it to Office 365, we start ingesting it. Once you have configured your users with archiving, your archives will grow indefinitely to meet the needs of your data. The second piece that we are announcing is there were pieces of our ecosystem, because they were either legacy technology or we had re-architected them, that weren't fully under the umbrella of preservation, immutability, and deletion. Public folders was that last bastion. We are delighted to announce public folder preservation and e-discovery. And before I move on, how many folks still have public folders and data in public folders? It's great. It's always good to see, given the number of times we've announced that they're going away. So preservation of public folders. And the third piece of this is document deletion in SharePoint and OneDrive. So we've had the ability to have immutability in place and preservation in SharePoint, but there hasn't been any simple way, apart from fairly complex content type policies within the SharePoint context, to delete content easily just based on creation date or time or site. And this has been likened to sort of the proliferation, the Wild West of SharePoint. But what we are releasing, and this will be available on premises as well, is document deletion policy to allow you to set a life cycle of content deletion within a SharePoint site. So if you have a site that is only for a particular time period or a temporary team site and the team is dissolved, you now have a way to manage that data so it can be preserved or deleted as you need. We've got a couple more things on its way. We're happy that we've got public folders, but compliance for modern groups and YAMA is coming soon. So how many folks think compliance for modern groups is more important than YAMA? How many folks think YAMA compliance is more important than modern groups? OK, cool. Thank you. And by the way, this data influences our decisions, so do raise your hand if you have an opinion. OK. So before I move on, I'd like to introduce Ben Appleby from the Information Protection team, who is now going to do a demo on drive shipping.
Thanks, Kamal. Hi, everybody. Let me just get my demo started. OK. So I'm just going to orientate you a little bit on what you're looking at here. This is the Office 365 Admin Center. And down at the bottom, there is a link for compliance. If you click on that, it takes you out to the Compliance Center, which is, you see the homepage for that here, which has some quick help links on the front. So I'm going to start by showing you the new drive shipping feature, which is a truly awesome feature in terms of managing the logistics of the physical world with getting data into a cloud service. So if you click on the Import tab in Compliance Center and then load up the Import Wizard, where's my Wi-Fi? Tell you what, let me switch machines. Okay. So a quick switch back. Okay. Apologies. My Wi-Fi is not working on my machine. There we go. Okay, so this is the import wizard, and in here you have the capability to start either a new job to ship data into the service, or you will also be able to use your network to copy it across. So you still have the traditional mechanism, but now you can also ship data on a physical hard drive, and that's what we're going to walk through today. And it's a super simple process. There's a tool that you download, which you see the link to here. When you download that tool, you point it at the PSTs that you want to ship into your Office 365 tenant. It will ask you for a secure key. The secure key is generated for you and is used to encrypt the data on the drive. And that ensures that when you ship that drive, nobody can touch that data that handles the disk. So FedEx or whoever your shipping provider is, the guys in the data center, they essentially unwrap it, they load the drive up, and the data is uploaded into the service still in its encrypted state. The next part of the process is that tool that you download using and then giving it this secure key to encrypt it. It will create for you a journal file, which you provide this wizard. So we give it a job name. Import PSTs. And we specify a drive file. Which is not on here. Yeah, go on, carry on with the presentation. Let me get this Wi-Fi working on here again.
We're going to come back to that at the end once Ben has his drives and his Wi-Fi on his brand spanking new device. So. Okay, great. Okay. Great. So what we're going to talk about next is e-discovery, and I promise we will come back to that because we've done that demo many times already. So imagine for a moment that your content is now uploaded into Office 365. At this point, one of the first things, and this comes down to the transparency pillar, if you give us your data, we have a responsibility to ensure that you are able to view it or access it at any time. It's a very, very advanced storage unit. You need to have the key. So e-discovery is really our term for compliance search. It is the ability to search content within your enterprise once you've actually uploaded it. And what makes e-discovery interesting is that with a lot of other services and other workloads, it tends to be metadata about the user. What makes this interesting in Office is content is created and preserved in Office. So all the IP of your enterprise is searchable and accessible via e-discovery. Well, the way we do e-discovery is, just as I talked about how an archive is within Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive, e-discovery is using the built-in search of Office 365, Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, LinkedIn, etc. Some of the advantages of using this built-in search is when content comes in, it's indexed as it comes in. When content is indexed, the index contains every property and has full fidelity. When content changes, that full fidelity is maintained. If I sent an email a few years ago, I edited that email, and then I do a search, both the edited copy and my current copy are visible. If I shared a document and I changed it, I started off, say, 10 years ago saying archiving was all about X, and then we got feedback from our customers saying, no, change this is the new vision, you would have all the versions of it, and we'd be able to see the evolution. This is only possible if you're able to have search in the context of where data is created and maintained. One search for all data types. I need to be able to answer the question of a single keyword and then being able to search that across all my data. Now, searching is great. Simple, straightforward. But there's another piece of this. How many folks are aware of, in January today, Microsoft made an acquisition? Can I see a show of hands? How many folks already know? Excellent. So I am thrilled to welcome the Equivio team. It's a small technology company from Israel who we acquired and who are responsible. They are the front runners in predictive coding technology within eDiscovery. And so our vision for eDiscovery includes the ability to analyze using Equivio Zoom. And lastly, once you've actually done a search, we give you the ability to export to our partners. So I mentioned earlier that partnerships are fairly important for us. And one of the things we've seen with Office 365 is that when you bring your data for Office 365, if we give you the ability to do search, but you need advanced review capabilities or case management, we will continue to invest in those. But until such a feature is available in Office 365, we want to give you the ability to have partners to do that experience. So here are some of the new features that we're building with eDiscovery. One is my ability to do unlimited concurrent searches. Another is more granular search permissions. And this is actually something that competitors do not have. This is the ability to say that only a certain user can search content, as well as they can only search content from date A to date Y. And this is because you have legal officers who are associated with a particular case or a particular litigation, and they need to have only a sliver of access to the data, not all the access. So ensuring that that data access is trimmed down is extremely important. Equivio now takes these rudimentary searches and basic culling of data and allows you to do analysis out of all of that to cull it down even further. And finally, our goal is to export it down to the smallest possible set, and then you can hand it over to a third party. So I'm delighted to announce something that I'm actually going to show you in a demo, which is Equivio running on Azure, and the ability, if you are an Office 365 customer and you want the ability to analyze that content, you can now sign up for the customer preview to do that. Okay? It's okay, I'll switch to the demo. Okay. So let's take a quick look. I'm going to close out of this. I'm going to go look at compliance search. So the example that I showed this morning, oh, let's see. Thank you. Let me switch out of that. Great. I'll take a moment to render. So what we're talking about here is an early look at our compliance search. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm an organization, and I want the ability to search my entire corpus for some data. I don't really know what it is. So in the example that we shared this morning, I've been reading in the news that there is an issue with a company that I've done business with. I don't really know what they're being investigated for, but I'm going to do a generic query to figure it out. So let's see. Okay. So let's do this search. Oops. Hang on, sorry. Now, since I'm not really sure where this information is, what I'm actually going to do is search my entire infrastructure. And over here, I am going to put in the keywords. Oops. Yes, you are not allowed trailing spaces in the name of your search. Now, while that search is completing and searching in my environment, I'm going to take a look at some of the other searches that I did associated with this. And you heard me talk about before that we are working with partners to ingest data that is not within the Microsoft ecosystem into Office 365. So let's look at Facebook, this particular search, which is search data ingested. And I'm going to take a quick look and preview these search results. And what I'm actually looking for is information about the company that's being investigated and wanting to see if there's a Twitter post or a Facebook feed associated with that. So let's see. I can see here there's a Facebook post. There's some Twitter. The joy of live demos. And so what I've got over here is the Twitter content. So I did a search of my environment. I did a search for all Microsoft-created data, which was in my documents and my emails. I didn't find anything really pertaining to this. But then I went and looked at the Twitter feed. And I found something interesting, that there was actually a Twitter post about the earnings report for this company that's being investigated. And it said, hey, look, there are going to be no surprises in this earnings report. Clearly, posting information about an earnings report when you have confidential data is against the law. And so here I had found the information because it was ingested from another piece of environment. Now, if only it was actually always this easy. The reality is, when I am looking at my data and when I am able to analyze it, eDiscovery just allows me to cull it down based on simple measures like keyword. What Equivio Zoom allows me to do, and this is an instance of Equivio that we acquired in January, running on top of Azure. And our intent is to have the eDiscovery workflow that I showed you transferring to the Equivio Analyze experience. So here, I had a large corpus of data. I don't really know what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to ask it to do is generate a set of themes. What this does is takes that data without any keywords or information from me and sets up a set of possible interesting data points. As I look through this, I see some keywords that might be interesting to me. Values, assets. So let me just click one of these and see what information I get. What Equivio allows me to do, and I'm going to, since I've shown this particular demo before, it allows me to cull this large set of data down into a smaller corpus of information, and it even allows within that smaller corpus to see where the overlapping themes are. Once you have actually taken this overlapped corpus and broke it down into the specific themes, what you're able to do as a legal officer is mark content as whether it's relevant or not to your search. Once you have marked a certain subset of content that's relevant or not to your search, what typically happens in a litigation? A lawyer goes and reviews every single piece of content. This is one of the biggest reasons why litigation costs are so high. Our goal is to take that manual process of reviewing every single piece of information and translating it into a software decision. Let me show you. So once you have gone and reviewed a certain subset of content, in the world today, typically, for you to know if content is valuable to your enterprise, if it's important, or if it's relevant to a case, all of these use cases, you need to go and manually review every piece of it. What predictive coding gives you, it allows you to manually review a subset of that content and then translate that to a larger corpus of data. This means that if today you had to look at 20 million pieces of data to determine if they needed to be ingested into Office 365, if they needed to be handed over in a litigation, if they needed to be preserved or deleted, what you can instead do now is review 2,000, 2 million, and then apply that learning to the larger corpus of information. This changes the way that we actually do data analysis and how we can take data actions. So in the CIO Summit that I mentioned earlier, one of the questions that we had for them was, okay, predictive coding is a relatively new piece of technology. Is it getting pickup? How are people responding to it? And the feedback from the summit was, in independent studies done of where content is accurate or not, there are white papers that effectively provide data to say that when you took 3 lawyers in a room and had them review a set of content, and then you had the predictive coding algorithm go off and make the same correlations on that content, when they reviewed all 200 million versus they reviewed 20 million and had the software make the assessments, post that, the software was found to be more accurate. And anyone who's had the pleasure of working with lawyers will know that this is not surprising. They do not agree. They're in a room. Okay, so moving back, that was the Equivio demo. What I'm going to do is switch back to, I'll just keep going. And now I'm going to move on to talk about another piece of technology that comes with the Compliance Center. Data loss prevention. So you have data in Office 365. We give you the ability to search it. The next question that you get is, how do you ensure that data within the corpus or within your organization does not get shared or leaked outside a security boundary? Well, what we've built, and this has existed using the very powerful methods of transport rules and exchange, what we've built is a mechanism to analyze data in Office 365, determine if it's sensitive or not, allow you to define policies for it, allow this policy to be applicable across multiple data types, and finally, and this is very key because it ties back to the people-centric aspect of this that I spoke about in the beginning, it allows end users to be informed when they are actually violating those policies. So the intent here is, if you are a well-intentioned user, this mechanism will prevent you from having any of your organization's data leave a security boundary. If you are a malicious user, this will not protect you, but what it will do is indicated by the last bullet. Your activity and your intention of having ignored that policy violation will be audited and reported. So here are some of the very cool Office 365 DLP features that we announced this morning. You've already got the ability to index the sensitive content as it arrives, and the classification and the creation of these very rich policies, either the default ones or the customized ones that we can provide for you by extending the system. Well, this morning, we announced the ability to have policy tips in SharePoint and Office clients in preview. I'm excited about this because what it effectively means is the way that you prevent data leakage or data loss is by, in the user's context, tell them that they are going to do something that is going to put their company at risk. And what that first announcement does is enable that. It also allows us to ensure that the productivity promise that we have to you, which is you should be able to use the Office clients in the richest experience without actually hampering the user's workflow, is enabled. Related to DLP is how we actually protect this data from flowing on devices. So how many folks in the audience have a BYOD problem? That's great. And then I'll ask the other way. How many of you have the BYOD gift? So one of the data points that we get, oh, thank you, yes, this is the positive gentleman, yes. One of the aspects of bring your own devices, one of the aspects of having this proliferation of data and devices in the world today is that users do not allow you to dictate what form factor they use corporate data on. There's an interesting stat recently that said more photographs will be taken in the next year than has ever been taken in the history of mankind. So the creation of content, the management of content on devices is a truism. Today, when you actually access Active Directory and when you do conditional access or log in, you don't have the ability in that login or in that auth flow to say, wait, is this device actually protected? Is this data actually sensitive? What we've built with the announcement of device protection in Office 365 is the ability in that step where you actually enter your credentials to answer the question, do you need to be compliant? And is your device safe for that access? The policies are defined once across all your form factors and across your tenants. So whether your device is an Android, iOS, or Windows phone, there's one policy. The end user and the data is protected on that device. And finally, if the end user decides to wipe the device or jailbreak the device, which is a classic indication of something that essentially removes corporate policy, that activity is audited and reported. So what we're going to show you now is a demo, if the gods are with Ben, who has been waiting here patiently, is a demo of the DLP and device protection experience. And so a couple of things as Ben gets set up. Our goal here in the notion of being people-centric is that you as an admin will have this ability within that one-stop shop of the Compliance Center to define these controls. And then when the user is within their experience, they are able to continue with their experience if they are well-intentioned, and if they're malicious, we have ways to audit and report on that.
Thanks, Kamal. So I'm going to very quickly recap on the import, the drive shipping demo, now that I've corrected the network issues. The issue that you saw me have when I was transferring laptops, by the way, is there's 2 files that you need to provide the wizard, which I had on the laptop that wasn't working and no means to get it across. So I'm just going to reorientate you again. We're looking at the Import tab in Compliance Center. You start the Import Wizard. And so I'm going to quickly go through this to say I've got hard drives prepared. I've got the secure key. I've downloaded this tool so that I can run it and it will copy the PSTs onto the drive, secure them using the key. And I have access to the mapping file. So this is a CSV that says for this PST, it needs to go into this archive or this mailbox. And it really is as simple as that. So you then step through, give the job a name, so import PSTs. And I'm now going to give it the journal file, so this file that I was missing before. It verifies that that file validates. And then you provide the mapping file. So this is just simply a CSV. And again, it verifies, it goes through the rows in that and verifies that it's correct. And then you fill in your contact details. And then when you fill this in, you have the shipping address of where to send the drives to. So you've got your details, contact details if the data center needs to contact you, and then you're given the address of where to send the devices to. You click close, and once you've shipped that and have a tracking number, you enter it in here. And that's it. When the drives arrive in the data center, the encrypted data is taken off the disk. It's decrypted using your key and a job is run using the mapping CSV file you've provided, and you get status updates in here. So you can see that the status here is ready to ship. You can go and run the tool, encrypt the data. You're good to go. So moving on to data loss prevention. All right, and really policy management for both DLP and device protection. DLP, as a reminder, is a mechanism that you can use to protect sensitive information within your company, regardless of where it is. And so I'm going to add a DLP policy. And for the purposes of the demo, I'm going to pick the pre-created classifications. And seeing as I'm British, I'm going to, out of all of the different classifications, I think I'll pick a UK one. UK personally identifiable information. For the Brits in the audience, they'll probably recognize what this detects. This detects UK national insurance number and a UK passport number. There's a whole heap of different classifications in there, from credit cards to social security numbers, different regions. It's an exceptionally powerful way of identifying content that you need to secure out of the box. Now, in this version, what you see here is that both SharePoint and OneDrive for Business are available to apply the policy to. In the future, you'll be able to apply the policy to Exchange as well, and then other services within Office 365. And then the final piece that I'll just walk through is that because we're using a pre-canned classification, it's built in some pre-canned rules. And it has this basic premise, which you can customize, of a low count and a high count. So if a document has a low count of national insurance numbers, i.e. it spotted it once, then you'll hit the low count rule. If there's lots of them in there, then in this particular default configuration, it's above 9, but it's whatever you set it to. So if there are 9 national insurance numbers in there, then it will trigger the high count rule. And just going into the rule itself to explain what that means, in this particular context, the actions that it's matching are the number of times that the sensitive content is detected within the document and who the content is shared with. So you can define it as, by default, it's saying outside of my organization, but you could also specify that as inside. If you don't want this data in your system, or you want to be able to alert, or you want to tell the user that they've got sensitive information in the document inside the company, then you can do that by changing the setting. And then in terms of the actions that you can take if sensitive content is detected, there's a whole variety of different options available to you. So you can notify the person that's taking the action, you can notify the content owner, you can use a policy tip. And the policy tip is the thing that you see inside the Outlook client, Excel client, the Outlook web client that notifies you that you're dealing with something with sensitive content inside it. And there is a default policy tip, or you can write your own custom policy tips. So it's an extremely powerful way of bringing your end users into the whole compliance process. And then finally, you can have incident reports going to your security team or to your IT team based on the conditions that you specify. And then the final piece of the wizard is whether you want to turn the policy on or not, and you can choose to have it on in test mode. And you see the same principle in device protection as well. Again, it removes a lot of the fear from testing out DLP, testing out device protection, is that you can either target it at a small set of users, or you can have it targeted at your company, but in report-only mode, so that you can understand what's going to happen when you turn it on. So that's DLP, and quickly I'll move back to device management. So we can see here there's 2 policies already in place. I'm going to create a third for the research team. And the first page that you see is defining the conditions the devices need to meet in order to connect to Office 365. So if you're using OneDrive on an Android device, that device needs to meet this list of requirements. And finally, you can specify whether, if a device is not compliant, what action is taken. And in this particular example, in the default setting, it's saying allow access but report the violation. And then the second page of a device policy is once you've ensured that the device meets your base requirements and is a compliant device, you can control certain settings on it. So, for example, you could block screen capture if you work in an organization or you're working in a particular location where recording information from it, from the environment is against policy. And then again, you have this capability to create the policy, leave it off, or say, yes, I'm going to enable it now. And if you're enabling it now, what you specify is an Azure AD group. And within that group are the users that you would like to apply the device policy to. Okay.
Okay. So what I want to talk about next is we've talked about being able to have visibility of your data using eDiscovery. But another aspect of visibility is knowing what every single user in your organization is doing. This means whether that user is a Office 365 admin, a tenant within your own environment, or a user who has certain privileges. So what we are announcing today, two things. One is the new audit pipeline that captures data from Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and data center administrators in Office 365, and an API to access all the data within that pipeline, the Management Activity API. Until this, we could not actually answer the simple question of what did Ben do, or what was done to this document. So what this new pipeline gives us the ability to do is an experience that allows you to view that content and a guarantee that there is consistent and complete logging across your environment. So we've added about 150 plus events. We've got about 100 partners who are actually building on this API. And those of you who saw the demo this morning saw a couple of those partners come on stage and talk about how they're building on it. By default, we store 90 days of data, but immutably. And if you want to store longer than that, you can store it for as long as you need based on your company's need. The schema across Office 365, so when you ask a question about, I want to see content edited, what this effort actually enables is you can ask that question the same way, whether that content exists as a document, an IM message, or with an email. And what Ben's going to show you real quick is that auditing UI.
So this is the new Office 365 auditing report, which you access in Compliance Center. You go to the Reporting tab and select the top report, which is View Office 365 Activity Report. This is in preview at the moment, so you won't see that there in a production tenant. And is shipping very soon. And this activity report will effectively replace the Azure AD and the Exchange reports that you see below. And it goes back to the point that Kamal was making at the beginning, which is changing the way we deliver compliance features in Office 365 to deliver them as a suite versus delivering them in individual workloads. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, simply for time, but this is an early version of the activity report. You'll see that you can filter by date, and the idea with this experience is that it's about investigating an issue. How can I get to the transactions, the metadata that happened on a piece of content, or the actions that a particular person took? And so those are your two primary filters within this experience. You can select a specific user or users, and you can specify a particular file or folder. And it doesn't matter where that person is in your organization, where that document might be, if there are multiple copies of it, you will see all of the transactions based on the filters you provide. And in here you can see a variety of different event types. And you can also filter if you know specifically which action you're looking for. So you know that somebody shared a piece of content, you can look at sharing link created. Or if you know that they've downloaded a piece of content, or you're worried that they've downloaded a piece of content and taken it with them, then you can track that as well. Okay.
Okay. To round this out, we're not done. So some of the things that are coming in the next few months and years. So you've been with us since we first decided to build archiving into the system, since we first decided to extend transport rules to become data loss prevention. Well, stay with us. Some of the things that are coming in the next months and years is supervisory review. You've said it's great that I have my content within Office 365, but what I want to really be able to do is sample a subset of that content. This is a key capability of any archive or any DLP or e-discovery solution. Drive shipping for other document types. Send us your documents, we'll upload them to OneDrive. I showed you a demo of ingestion for social content, but what we're going to do is take it to the next level. You'll actually be able to do a search that says Facebook data. Find me keywords associated with that. Twitter data. So where these third-party content, they become first-class citizens. Analyze with Office 365 Search and Equivio, essentially tying the two experiences I showed you in the early code across these demos that you got to see, tying those together to give you a seamless experience. And then new experiences. While we love the black and white and blue expanse of our UI, we do believe we can build a richer, more powerful experience for our customers. And the last two is alerting and anomaly detection and extending device protection to additional devices as well as form factors. Now, the three partner lines that you see on this slide are worth noting because we're opening up preview these three areas for partners. We're interested in building a solution for our customers with these partners. So if you're a customer who wants to either play around with the code or you're a partner who wants to build on it and provide a solution, let us know. But before we go, we're going to take a moment to show you the next generation compliance experiences, what we want it to look like.
Thanks. So as you can see, this experience is a lot more graphical than the Compliance Center that's in the service today. You're seeing a prototype, and so the design will probably change by the time it ships. But there's two things that you can see on this screen. You can see the new navigation model that we're using on the left-hand side, and you can see the new report styles in the middle. And there's a number of interesting things to draw out. I'm going to dig into the files shared report. Files downloaded. And the first thing is that these reports are aggregating and analyzing your audit data, your data in a meaningful way. And they also enable you to drop onto the chart an alert line. So you can use the trend to spot issues within your tenant, and you can use the alert line to notify you of future issues. All right. Thank you very much.
So folks, thank you for your time. This was our compliance session, and I will conclude with related sessions and the last thing. So you own your data. That is our goal. We are the guardians of it, and we want to make your experience rich, beautiful, and insightful. That is our goal. Thank you.